Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Ken.
Good evening. Hello.
Good to see everyone. Welcome, everyone, to episode 539. What does the Word of God say about wokeism and similar movements? And with us, we have Mike and Stan, and as always, Dr. Ricks. If you would start us out, that would be wonderful.
Just a few quick groaners I got from my younger son. Why do plumbers quit their jobs? Because it's training. Did you know that toasters aren't waterproof? I was shocked. Why did the elevator go to the doctor? Because it was coming down with something.
Oh, my.
Why should you not iron a 4-leaf clover? It's not good to press your luck. And the last one, the simple one, what kind of clothes do lawyers wear to court? Lawsuits. We're going to enjoy ourselves today talking about wokeism. You might have heard the expression, go woke and go broke.
Oh, yeah. The latest one is Harley Davidson.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did anybody see the guy, was it a 50 caliber machine gun? The kind you put on a gunship, and he blew up his Harley?
Yeah.
You saw it too, huh?
Guys are peeling the Harley emblems off their bikes. They're peeling the Harley. They said they'll never buy another one.
Wow.
They've ruined their brand. There's not enough woke people to buy Harleys to support the company.
No.
So everybody's out. You should buy stock in Indian right now because they're all going out and buy Indian bikes.
Well, one thing about true fascism as opposed to communism, they're similar. They're both socialistic, but fascists enlist companies to do some of their enforcement for them. So in a sense, if a company goes woke, they're moving the left movement for people. So I want to just give a little bit of background on wokeism. At least I think this is accurate. I guess everybody, by the way, I read a bunch of articles on it. Different people have different opinion, but what I think it means, but also from a Bible standpoint, how we should feel about going woke. It's an anachronism from radical racial communist groups from the big cities primarily. Woke, W-O-K-E. And it's supposed to stand for willfully overlooking known evil. And you don't want to willfully overlook known evil. Now you're going to say, well, doesn't that sound wonderful? Doesn't that sound wonderful?
On the surface.
But the problem is, who gets to define what is evil? And basically what they're saying is social justice is what they're after. Not God's justice, but social justice. And I know that sounds like a fine point, but it really is a big deal. Right? Because what popular leftists say is social justice may not be God's justice. And that's where the trick comes in. And I think it's rather well done by progressives. They tell people you have to stay awake to fight for progressive causes. And that's where it gets tricky. What are progressive causes? And I heard this one major writer. He used to be on Fox and then he died. I can't think of his name, but it's very, very wise guy. He says, what they're doing is they're defining deviancy up and normalcy down. Deviancy up, normalcy down. If you redefine things, then what is good is bad and what is bad is good.
Yep.
Well, it's like in the book of Genesis, it talks about, Adam and Eve. If you believe the Bible, and it's true, that God gave them he told them to look at the trees and everything they could have to eat, but he talked about this one tree that was the knowledge of good and evil. So he, right in the very beginning, he defined that there was a difference between good and evil. But, wokeism is, willfully overlooking known evil. Well, what is evil? Like you said, who defines evil? Well, if you look it up in the dictionary, this is the definition I got, and it's profoundly immoral or wicked, bad, wrong, sinful, ungodly, and unholy. Those are the synonyms of evil. But society says that's not what evil is. They define evil as something altogether different, because once you toss God out of the equation, then evil is someone stopping me from doing exactly what I want to do.
There you
And it's
go.
not what God tells me not to do. So that's just the thought that I had on the very first line when I read this definition here, which is good, by the way, that we educate everybody what that word actually means. I think that's wonderful.
If it feels good, do it. Wasn't there a song by that title or something like that?
This stuff started back in the 60s.
Yeah.
If you're not with the one you love the one you're with, stuff like that.
Sounds good when you say it, right?
Yeah, yeah. It hasn't worked out so well for the country, though.
Yeah. By the way, have you noticed something that you would think that sexual revolution and all the things going on would increase the birth rate, but actuality in most situations, people who stay married for a long time actually produce more children. And the reason we're having population collapses, as Elon Musk describes it, is because of all this fooling around. They got everybody all screwed up. I know it doesn't seem to make sense. It's the opposite of what you would think. But we're sexually dysfunctional, but we don't know it.
Well, look at some of the nations in history that have practically disappeared. I mean, their populations began declining, and I think France is one right now, among other nations that are very concerned about their population because of, and whether it's due specifically to immorality or not, but it's certainly, it's almost like I watched a program here a couple of nights ago about, and we've all forgotten about the 80s epidemic of AIDS and how bad that was and how scared our nation became. People thought there was they were concerned there wouldn't be any end to the AIDS epidemic. They didn't have a cure. They didn't even know what it was. Here were all these people contracting AIDS before they finally found out it was a sexually transmitted disease. But people were getting it in blood transfusions that had never had immoral sexual encounters with anyone else. So, I mean, that was a shock, but that's all faded in the distant past now. And it was something that was in the fore only just a few decades ago. And it certainly affected, I believe it affected the childbearing family. People were concerned about it, whether they should have children or not. And I believe you're absolutely right. It can lead to a whole decline of a nation eventually.
But it feels good.
Japan's in a lot of trouble too, because I think they're having less kids than anybody. They've already crossed some level where they probably can't maintain their population now.
I saw this last night. China's problems are different, but they're missing at least 30 million women are missing because of abortion.
Wow.
And a key part of their population, young adult level. And that's a big deal.
And they're way overbalanced on having too many men versus women in that country.
In that age group because of abortion. So all this messing around that people do, trying to play God is, you know what I mean? It's not working.
No.
We just think it is working, or they think it's working. Would you put up our first scripture, please, Ken?
Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light, light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet, sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight.
That last part about wise in their own eyes, doesn't that kind of grab you?
Yep, and that's exactly what we're facing with.
Yeah, just ask them.
They'll tell you.
Do y'all remember something that Ronald Reagan said? It was very profound. He said, he said, liberals know so much.
Mhm.
They know so much, it's just not true.
Not that they don't know anything, but what they know is wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That stuff is just not true.
And it's only worse now than it was then.
When you look back at some of the dictators of the recent past, and I mean, World War II, you think of men like Stalin and, Hitler, they became wise in their own eyes, and they were absolutely insane. And yet they were leaders of huge countries and nations, and the people were following their will, and they were deceived into doing so, I believe. But look at Stalin. I mean, millions of their population died as a result of his leadership, and that's
how he handled his opposition.
Well,
that's why he killed 80 million people. If you opposed Stalin, you were just shot, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
And Mao, in some ways, was actually, they say Mao enjoyed watching. Well, what he did when he went to the group to the mountain, he asked for contributions for how to improve things and new ideas. They put them up on the bulletin board. Then at some point, the people with the new ideas and criticism, he enjoyed sadistically watching them be tortured to death. That's Mao Zedong.
Hitler was that way too. If he couldn't be there to see them being executed, he wanted them to film it, so he could watch it later. I mean, that's how heinous he was.
What's the guy? What was the guy's name in Che Guevara? Had a window put in his office just so he could see when they were torturing and executing the people outside outside where he worked.
We have no idea how dangerous we are teetering on, that kind of heinous, evil leadership.
Well, they're putting. I mean, today's the speech she gave today laid out a communist agenda, straight up communist agenda.
And the media said it was wonderful, right?
Oh, I'm sure. I can't listen to the media anymore because I don't have that many brain cells to lose anymore, so I don't listen to it. Then I might not be able to brush my own teeth in the morning.
It's like I think I saw this. I can't. I may have missed part of it, but one of the main networks was mentioning that Harris came up with the brilliant idea of not taxing tips.
Yes.
A minute, didn't they? Don't they know that Trump came up with that about a month or so ago?
Weeks and weeks ago.
Yeah.
But my guess is if they don't mention it, a lot of people won't know. If all you listen to is ABC and NBC, you wouldn't know, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
They're not going to tell you. Man, this is terrible with how them. In other words, people think they're wise and they're being misled. I also heard this on a religious show. They said that young people who are the most critical of the Bible know the least amount about the Bible. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does to me.
They think they know, but they really don't even know the Bible, but they're very critical of it.
Yeah.
They're the same ones that are making all these chants at these, from the river to the sea, and they don't even know what the river or the sea is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These people are on X all day long on the social media complain. I mean, they just sit on there and they post after post after post complain about people who believe in God and the Bible and all that stuff. I'm like, if you're an atheist, what do you care?
Exactly.
If you don't believe God exists, why are you spending so much time on something that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
I've said this before. I think they do believe he exists, and they just don't like what he has to say. They don't like him.
It's always eating at the back of their mind that there could be a God and he could be right, and I am against his will, and there is consequences to bear, and they won't ever escape that conscious. I guess at some point they will escape their consciousness. Their conscience
Mhm.
will be tarnished to the point to where they. But I truly believe that in itself might actually be God still trying to get them to turn to him. Even in their utmost rebellious state, he might still be leaving the door open till the very last moment, because it talks about his long suffering with them
Mhm.
and giving someone every opportunity to see the light of day, and yet they refuse to do it.
Sure. Because when judgment comes, nobody can say we didn't have a chance. I mean,
Yeah. And by the way, in most academic circles I saw, the people who are most adamant against intelligent design or God are the biologists. And then I realized one day why. Because the evidence is smacking them in the face. If the more they learn about the human and plant cells, the more intricate the design is. I mean, all kinds of stuff that only an idiot could think could happen by luck and chance. It's designed. Well, I know I've mentioned this before, one of the big things they now know, plant and animal life. For any life to exist, you have to have a ton of information programmed into the DNA, RNA, and probably a few other systems too. It has to be there before anything else happens. So how does that information, that complex programming get there to begin with?
Yeah.
They skip over that part.
I mean, it
Well,
has to do with what we're talking about. It's denial of reality. Wokeism is denial of reality. No, a man cannot get pregnant. It
I was
just
just
doesn't.
about to bring that up. Even in nature, if you believe in the evolutionary theory, what do you do with reproduction? How do you explain that? I mean, did they evolve with reproductive organs that would reproduce a species exactly like they look like? I mean, it's
And
the
everything.
possibilities of that are ridiculous to even
it had to
contemplate.
be parallel reproduction.
It'd be parallel evolution, and they had to evolve at the exact same time, male and female. And a mathematician won't even do the math on that because you can't. It
Right.
doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And how did they reproduce before that happened?
They did,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's you just can't explain it without someone designing. And programming is beyond what our brilliant programmers can do today. It's better
No, they
than what
can't
we
even
could do.
come close.
You know what I'm saying? And even single cell animals, plants. Matter of fact, there's some flowers. I found this out from my son. I think it's tulips, have more genetic information than we do. Don't ask me to explain it. I don't even understand. I know a little bit, but plants also have plenty. I mean, have DNA and all that other stuff. Wow. You wouldn't think that a plant would have that much information, would you?
Every bit of it is so complex. I mean, they were talking, I saw this too, some fish they were posting the other day that actually is in the bottom of the ocean, that the male and the female actually sort of glue together and become one fish. I've never seen this before, and I was questioning whether it was actually real. But evidently, this female absorbs his body into her body, and they become one, and then they mate, and of course reproduce from then on. But so bizarre, the things that they keep discovering, and the animals that they have not yet discovered that they find evidence of, or discover every day new species. It's just mind blowing, the the complexity of every single one of them, whether they be plant or animal.
People might be clever, but they're not as wise as we think we are. That makes sense. By the way, something that they use, something called semantic tyranny, and that is where you label something in such a way that anybody who disagrees automatically looks bad. Like you call a bill that would really hurt women who stay home the Equal Rights Women's Amendment or something. Well, who's going to vote against that? You see what I mean? And all kinds of things that they do. And they put titles on it, so you got to support it or you're bad. Would you read Isaiah 5:13, please, Ken?
Therefore, my people have gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. Their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst.
And I really think we're getting what I call good, useful knowledge. A lot of kids, college kids, they could name the Bill of Rights. They don't, a lot of things they don't know, but they should know. And
there's been several, I used to like it when people like, late night hosts would go out and interview people out on the street and ask them to say the 10 Commandments. And I mean, they didn't know any of them, or they'd say, who's the president? And they wouldn't know who the president is, but they claim erudition or, they claim to have all this knowledge and understanding of huge things of the universe, but they couldn't even, tell them who their local mayor was.
Yeah, I think Jay Leno did a lot of that.
Yeah, Jay Leno, he did. It was just unbelievable, really.
Exposed what little people knew about things, and stuff we just take for granted.
Yeah.
Growing up at the time we did, it's like, yeah, we know.
And I think all this liberal wokeism is causing problems, and it's going to make it harder to get good leadership. We're starting to see the quality of that in a certain party already, aren't we seeing it, Ken?
Oh, yeah.
So would you put on Isaiah 3:6, please?
When a man shall take hold of his brother of the house of his father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand. In that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be an healer, make me not a ruler of the people.
When Israel was going down morally, things got so bad that a lot of good people didn't want to be in charge. Can you see that the way things are going now, a lot of good people say, if I go into politics and try to be a leader in this country with good standards, they'll destroy me.
Sure.
It's a lot. There's a lot of people that are willing, though, to compromise on their moral standards or their values and go along with the system because they've got an agenda, because they know it's an easy way to the top. But very few people, I agree, Dr. Ricks, that are willing to stand up and stand their ground for what they know is morally right and honest and decent. And I think it's interesting that this person in this prophecy says, I don't want to. He at least is smart enough to realize that no one can fix this ruin, this condition we're in. It's an impossible task. I think it's very unfortunate that we get to that point, though, where people that are good leaders that have good moral character give up the fight. Say, why would I want to waste my time? And if that's the case, then we're giving up. The side that's morally right is sort of giving up the fight. And that means we are accepting of what they're doing. I mean, in a way, by not keeping the wall up, keeping the barrier, keeping the defense up. And that even adds to more decline more rapidly.
And I almost think if you, even in big corporations and boards, if you play the right game and go along with things that you probably shouldn't, you get rewarded. And if you try to stand up for too much, and that's not good for the country. Would you read the second scripture, Ken? 1 and 3.
For behold, the Lord of hosts, takes away from Jerusalem the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet, and the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50, and the honorable man, the counselor and the skillful artisan.
I would argue that, let's take the period of the American Revolution. At that one time in history, there had a lot of really great men. I realize men are all flawed, but you know what I mean by great men, like Ben Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington. I'm probably, some of those, Monroe, and a lot of the guys that you would come out with. America was a highly biblical country, relatively speaking, as the world existed in those days. And they had a lot of good men. And that's why the American Revolution was a success where the French Revolution wasn't. Anyway, America was on its way to becoming the greatest power in the world. But when a country becomes immoral and wokeism gets going, it seems like God takes away great leadership.
And I think you can see that today, and if people would just use common sense and look around and see what kind of leadership we have, you can sort of reverse engineer this scripture here, and you can say, do we have good leadership? Now you can reverse engineer a little. You go too far with it. Some people will say, well, because all these bad things are happening to me means that I'm a bad person or I've done something evil in God's eyes. That may not necessarily be the case. It may be because you're in a society that's on a downward slope, that's descending into decadism and immoral behavior, and as a result of our behavior, there are consequences, and it is taking away leadership, taking away men that have the wisdom to look into our enemies and know when they're going to attack, to defend us, and have great counselors around our president, giving him great advice about decisions that have to do with geopolitics and things. All of those things if they were gone or suddenly taken away, we're just standing out here in the dark in the rain with no umbrella. I mean, we're just at the mercy of our enemies.
Yeah. As an example, there was an announcer for ESPN, a woman who got fired because she outwardly opposed men competing with women.
Yeah.
What? I can't believe it.
Here's a lady with principle, common sense.
Yeah.
And she spoke out, stayed by her principles, and she got fired.
So she got slapped down. So anybody else dares to do the same is in risk of maybe a multi-million-dollar contract. So they're never going to stand.
Yeah, who knows?
That's woke culture.
And that's what happens to the people that stand up to this stuff.
Yeah, they cancel people all the time. Woke culture did, and and the press has gotten so mean that a lot of potentially good leaders just won't put themselves forward. They see what the press does. You know what I mean, right?
I don't want them to put me in the spotlight. They're saying I don't want to be under that spotlight. Because not only they may be, by the vast majority, a morally right person, but they may have flaws in their life too that they don't want to expose. They may have a past. They may have things in their life, we all do, that we don't want a microscope on our life. It'd be horrible. I don't even know how Trump handles it, but it seems to roll off his back, like water off a duck's back. But not only that, but you don't want to have everything scrutinized in your life, because then they're going to find a reason to fire you, get rid of you, or put you aside, whatever.
And Stan, if they can't do that, they'll lie about you.
They'll create something.
Doesn't matter, see?
Yeah.
They make
you
up
have to reform the system. You're bucking against wokeism, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Just because we can't find you doing something bad doesn't mean you're not.
Some girl that you bothered somewhere in the 8th grade, she can't remember what decade it was, and where in the city it happened. But you were mean to, and you think I'm making that up, but that actually happened to, was it Kavanaugh? But anyway, never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, don't you?
Well,
I can't
yeah,
even remember
they would
every girl
invent something
I
if
met
they
in
need
8th
to.
grade. Never mind. I'm being silly, but you get the point. If you want to get, like you say, make things up, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And the problem is, what is God's justice and who defines what is true evil? Because that really is the question. And I believe what they can do is, that semantic tyranny, William Bernays invented public relations. He was also America's propaganda committee chairman during World War I. So he's a brilliant guy, cousin to Sigmund Freud. So he was the first one to translate Sigmund Freud's book from German to English. He came up with the term semantic tyranny. He says, you give your ideas labels that are so lofty that anybody who opposes what you want, well, automatically you can accuse them of all kinds of weird things, and which they do. I'm trying to remember some of the weird things he mentioned. Oh yeah, weird things like if they disagree with you, they want to protect the border, they're xenophobic. Who wants to be xenophobic? Or they're racist, or they're misogynistic, or they're homophobic, or Islamophobic. You see what I mean?
I'd like to introduce a new term in defense of that. It's called theophobic. You know what that is? It's the fear of not obeying God's laws. I'd like to introduce that term. I think it's one that we need all to have on our vocabulary. Theophobic. I think it's an absolute wonderful defense against these other superimposed, highfalutin terms. And I think it's one that every Christian ought to have on their lips.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like it.
Theophobic.
You disagree with the Sabbath? You disagree with the Sabbath, you're theophobic.
Yeah.
Maybe we ought to come up with some more like that. I don't know.
That's great.
In England, it's gotten really bad. If you say anything about immigrants or what you think is Islamic misbehavior, you're in big trouble. Oh, wow.
Yep.
No freedom of speech. That's my understanding. They send the police for you. I thought, wow.
Telling the truth will get you in jail.
For your speech. Unbelievable. Well, how long will it be before we're that way here in the United States? I mean, we are to some degree now.
I mean, there's a guy that was put in jail for posting memes in the 2016 election.
Yeah.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Yep.
Hate speech can be considered, something worthy of jail time, I guess.
But what bothers me is everybody who knows anything about the Bill of Rights should know freedom of speech, freedom of religion, number one. Well, freedom of speech automatically implies popular speech is automatically free. I mean, who's against popular speech? If it's popular, everybody loves it. It's for to protect unpopular speech or minority speech. And if you don't know that, you don't understand the first principle.
Yep.
Right.
But they don't seem to know that, or they don't want to know it.
No, because it makes them see uncomfortable speech. They don't want to hear it because it conflicts with their narrative, their ideology.
Right.
They can't do that. You cannot. That's why they're afraid of AI. They're not afraid AI is going to do some horrible things and crash the planet. They're afraid they won't be able to pull the wool over everybody's eyes because AI don't care about politics and it'll just tell you the truth. And they can't have that happen. So they're working they're trying to pass laws and work behind the scenes to make sure AI is woke. Yeah. Wokeness is already drilled into most artificial intelligent software. It's drilled into it, so you will get garbage out. They put garbage in, you get garbage out. Don't waste your time with AI because it's not going to give you what you want. The truth.
Have you noticed that the company that pushed AI stock that was up so high last month is down now? AI is not the profit-driven machine, at least not right away in the short run. Mm-hmm. Everybody thought it was. I don't know what that means, but But I think they're teaching AI to lie, like you say. That's really not good.
Well, yeah.
Oh, well. Let's go to Isaiah 8:19, please, Ken.
And when they say to you, seek those who are mediums and wizards, should not a people seek their God? To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them.
I guess you have a choice. You have a choice to go along with a decadent society, or you have a choice to go along with what God says. And we've already, I think, proven what happens to society when they reject God's laws or God's way of life and where it's headed. And I guess you have to determine if that's a true statement or not. And here we see a statement from the Word of God that says there's no light in there, and basically no truth in them if they're not speaking according to His words.
You look at something like the history of communism, very secular, and it was the greatest economic disaster of the 20th century.
And they know this, and they know this. That's what's unbelievable. Historians know that we're destined to repeat history again. I mean, that's a given. And it's almost like they want to repeat history again. I don't get it. They look at what's happened in history. Ancient Rome, for example, what happened in Germany. I mean, it is unbelievable. They have no religious affiliation, and they still know that we're going to repeat history. And yet we're headed towards repeating history again. It's just blows my mind that we can't learn from history.
Liberals never think what they're doing is wrong. They just don't think they've done enough of it yet. This time we'll make it work because we're going to do more liberal stuff and we're going to make it work.
Things are different this time. That's right.
We're in charge this time, not those other liberals.
And in reality, it's worse now than it's ever been, and they don't even know that. We're on the very brink of a catastrophe, and economically and we always in our country are what they say, bet on the come. If it gets better, if the price of oil just goes up a certain price, everything will be fine. We can pay off all of our debts and we'll go forward. If I could just get that extra raise, that extra $5,000-$10,000 a year, everything would be fine. Then I could pay off my credit cards and get back in out of debt. And our whole country has that same mentality. Even on the federal level, we think we're gonna outlive this debt that is running away from us at supersonic speed. So we got to some point face reality, and that's something nobody seems to want to do.
Like you were saying, Mike, they think but we're smarter than the old communists because we're in charge, whoever the we are.
That's
and
right.
you see it in New York and Hollywood, but we're smart enough to. By the way, this is something, I believe this is true. Communist China in the 80s and 90s and a little bit further, they pretty much went for their version of capitalism, and China prospered. Then Xi Jinping came along. He's been putting more and more government controls of the economy, arrested and roughed up a lot of the billionaires because they were acting too much free talk. And guess what's happened to the Chinese economy? It's imploding.
Yeah.
Young people in China can't get jobs. In other words, more government planning actually messed up communist China's economy. And it's scary. They might go to war just to keep. I don't know. All I'm saying is China has problems because government planning does not work.
And they have a greater risk of not reacting because of the size of their population. I mean, we in the United States, we've got 300 million people. We can react certainly to a certain degree to readjust and add on some interest, maybe borrow some money, and we could probably survive. But when you're talking about over 1 billion people, I mean, their ability to react has to be very calculated. Are they going to lose 1 million people through starvation or more? I mean, it's very, very risky what you're describing. It's very risky.
Yeah, the thing about go ahead, Dr. Ricks.
Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say the thing about communists, leftists, they're the same no matter where they are, who they are, or when they are. The communists 120 years ago are exactly the same as the communists that are running for the presidency today. They put out the same exact policies, do the exact same things, and it always results in the exact same status for the people. Just misery, pain, and death. It never changes.
When God says there's no light in them, like they want to do price control, real estate control. Maybe for a short-term emergency, but it's got to be very, very short-term. That stuff has been proven to backfire. What it always produces are horrible shortages in housing. And believe me, if they start messing with that sort of thing, it'll make things worse. That's what's happening in China, too much regulation. Their real estate industry has collapsed. And I don't know, it's hard to know what's going to happen, but it's not good for the world peace either, having, let's say, an unstable China around.
Yeah.
So just something to watch. People think they're so smart, but we really are. We need to follow God's ways more. And messing with private property, because one of God's laws is you shall not steal. Whenever the government says we're going to redistribute wealth, I know that sounds wonderful, but what happens is you demotivate everybody, and eventually you can't redistribute what was not produced. They produce a lot less, so you have everybody's equally poor, except for the elites
Right.
who run the show. Yeah, well, that's all we need to be, everybody poor like Russian peasants.
Yeah, see North Korea after dark.
Yeah.
All the elites
Exactly.
are where the lights are on.
Yeah, so people think they know, but God really knows, and we don't know as much as we think we do. Do you read Isaiah 55:8, please?
For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord.
And I think we have another problem that wokeism does. I'm going to speak about the clergy. Many clergies in big churches, in what I call major places in America, some are just liberal pastors, they've been brainwashed in the seminaries, but some know a lot of things are wrong biblically, but they're afraid to preach it. They're afraid to say anything to their congregation that's not woke, or they're going to be silent. But you realize if things are morally going down and you're silent, isn't that sort of saying you're accepting it?
Being a minister, you sort of have in the back of your mind this dream that you would love to be able to stand up in front of some of these big congregations and just speak the truth. But the idea that you think that you would be able to stand up in front of some of these congregations and just simply read portions of the Bible. I mean, you don't have to give any comment, but just stand up and read what the Bible says. It's an absolute impossibility in churches. Now that's hard to believe.
They would run you out of there so fast.
They would escort you out the door. Because you dared to read from God's word, and that tells me that something is seriously wrong with our, what they call churches. I don't believe that they are, if they would do such a thing. But they tried to take Jesus out and throw him over a precipice too. When he dared to, to combat their attitudes and their behavior.
I admit there's a range of churches, and some churches do some teaching. But I get the impression the majority of churches in America, it's music, activities, announcements, and more music, and very little Bible, like a little slither here to spice things up, but nothing too serious.
I was thinking about that. Who was it? Wasn't it the VP? The VP of British Petroleum. You remember when they had the Gulf oil spill down here where the well broke off and it was gushing oil out in the Gulf? And this went on for nearly a month, if you remember, before they finally got this thing under control. And I remember this VP of British Petroleum was here, and they interviewed him. And one of the things he said was, "I just wish that my life could go back to the way it was." In other words, don't bother me with your problems. And I think that some of the clergy are that way today. It's don't bother me with all of your problems. Just sit there, be quiet. Let me give them a little 15-minute sermon and go home. And that's it. That's all there is to it. And you know, it really should be work. It should be warning the people. That's really what we're essentially saying here is the clergy have fallen short of warning the people against this kind of behavior that's going to lead to even more decadence and even further, you know, descent into immorality and the loss of our nation. And that's, you know, that's it. That's part of that responsibility falls at the steps of the church leadership, I believe.
There's verses about the watchman. You know, if you don't warn, you're going to be guilty of what they're doing.
Ken, could you read Isaiah 56:10? Goes on what Mike was just saying.
His watchmen are blind.
I didn't read it.
They are all ignorant. They are all dumb dogs. They cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber.
Yeah. And they don't want to lose their congregation. I mean, you know, we hear stories of that occasionally.
Well, they love itching. They have itching ears that want to be scratched. You know, they want them to preach smooth things. You know, that's what the Bible says.
Sure.
The truth hurts sometimes, you know, but it should be preached. The truth should be preached, whether it hurts or not. Let the chips fall where they may. Let the people decide whether they need to change or not.
I would argue even Protestant churches that don't know about the Sabbath, at least in the past, some of them did push for morality and some other things. And at least I know some that wouldn't christen children born out of wedlock. Not that they were mean to people, but that did have some positive effect on society. They have stopped doing that for decades. At least that's what I'm told.
Yeah.
There's very little of that goes on now. And that's not.
And why? Why did they do that? Is it because of society? Or is it because of what's going on inside the churches? Money.
I think you're right, Dr. Rick.
Yeah. I don't know. But I'm not saying I don't understand their problem, but I can see that's the value of a clergy if you can be a warning to people.
I love your analogy of a watchman. It certainly is. You know, he's standing up on the hill. He sees the invading armies coming, and he just yawns and goes back to sleep and says, "Oh, well." I mean, that's essentially what's happening to church leaders that don't stand their ground, make a voice, and let their voice be heard. So I guess the people could kill the watchman just as easily. Tell that idiot to shut up and come down off the wall and quit warning us, so I can go back to sleep.
Ken, would you read Philippians 3:18, please?
For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is in their shame, who set their mind on earthly things.
And I think wokeism pushes people to a more earthy perspective on things.
Yeah. And I see people that God is their belly. You know, go to Walmart.
I wrote here, could church-going people be enemies? Question mark. I mean, people that sit in church, is that what he's saying here? Is he saying that there are people that appear to be righteous, but they're enemies of the cross, or is he saying that's people outside the church, or is he just warning of the general consensus out there in society?
I think Paul is telling the Philippians that some of the people that hang around them are actually pulling down church standards.
I think so.
He's
too.
warning them. I don't know if he's telling them to kick them out of the church exactly. He's saying avoid them, kind of let them know that they need to straighten up before you'll be spending a lot of time with them. We always assume that the false churches came out of the original church, but they probably had a lot of problem people in there early on in the true church. And so Satan was working on them way back when Paul was starting those churches.
And it seemed like he had problems almost with every single one of them, you know, that he had to deal with and along the way of his ministry.
And we've seen a few problems today, just in my
Yeah, that's for sure. Kim, would you read Isaiah 59:14?
Justice is turned back and righteousness stands afar off, for truth is fallen in the street and equity cannot enter.
See, a lot of people, equity is part of that DEI thing that goes along with wokeism, equity. I think equity and fairness get mixed up, but they're really not the same thing. You can have equal opportunity, but you can't guarantee equal outcomes because it's just not possible in a real world, in a realistic world. It's just not possible.
I think that's their goal, as I understand things.
Yeah, it's just not possible, and we need to be aware of that if we're all equal, we're going to be all equally oppressed and all equally poor, except for the elites at the top. That's the only equality you're going to get out of communism, that kind of thing. And legacy media is totally compromised. It says truth has fallen in the street. So much of what they tell you in academia and on legacy media can't stand the test of time or truth. Let's read Timothy 4:1. I know we have a couple more scriptures, but we still have enough time to cover a couple more. And this is one I think is interesting if you look at it from a certain perspective.
Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in later times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats.
Now, I will admit, the rest of the scripture doesn't fit wokeism so much. But if you look at this part, I happen to know that one of the major organizations that got woke going, BLM, and they recently took it off their website, but it was on there for a while. They're against the nuclear family. They're organized by 3 lesbians. They don't particularly like marriage. And they're against the nuclear family. I mean, they're a little anti-man, truth be told, and many of them push vegetarianism. Now, just to make it clear, I'm not against being a vegetarian, and I'm not even against being single. But if you push it too hard as a woke standard of excellence, I think it's bad for society.
Well, when you look at I guess I have to ask that question sorry about that. Why? Why would they do that? Well, the first thing you talk about here is the family and marriage. God created and performed the very first wedding ceremony between Adam and Eve. And he said to them, go forth and multiply the earth. In other words, go have a big family, go have children. And to me, I've always felt that the family is sort of a microcosm of what God's plan is. I mean, he has the father in his proper place, who is a loving, kind, authoritative or authoritarian position there where children look up to someone of authority. It's sort of like mankind looking up to God as the one who has the ultimate authority. And then the woman, of course, is the nurturing one, like the church is. And then, of course, children are sort of metaphors of God's children, or God's plan to have children of his own in his own family. So when you rip all of that out of society, you lose that ability to see that great plan that God has, and you start instituting these other things in its place. And I think society becomes increasingly confused about, what their goal, what their mission, what their purpose is here on this earth. And I see that in a lot of people that have gone that direction. It seems as though they are confused about why they're here or even what they are. And that we're seeing that even in the Olympics this year.
And I noticed at work, the most liberal ones, we were getting more and more liberal teachers, and more of them were vegans. And I know that various kinds, some vegans take no cheese and some take cheese and dairy, but I don't know, it's just somehow, it's a growing trend, and I can sense that. And I know for those that are big time vegans, if you know how to do it and get the right proteins and whatever those amino acids are, you're quite healthy, but it can be a problem if you don't know what you're doing. And I just sense it's a trend that's not a godly trend, too much of it.
Well, why? Let me ask you this too, or I'll just ask this as a generic question. If you decide, and I don't believe it's right, I'm just saying, if a person decides that they want to go down the road of having a relationship with a same-sex couple, say they want to be a same-sex couple, then why not just do it discreetly and go ahead and have your relationship? But why do you have to be on Main Street with flags hanging on both sides of your house, promoting that lifestyle as if to say all of society should accept what I'm doing? I mean, to me, it's sort of hypocritical to want to live in a free society, and yet you want to impose your ideology upon the whole nation. And if the whole nation doesn't accept it, then we're considered to be the one that is that is woke. That we're ignoring something that is right or evil or an evil. So maybe I'm just expressing something that I feel or see in society, and not really a question.
I think they want acceptance. They want you to accept their lifestyle. Give up what we know is right and say, hey, it's okay for you guys to do that.
I also sense that there's a dislike for the nuclear family.
There is. The left wants to eliminate it, like you said. It's been a lot of leftist organizations. Part of that, their agenda is to eliminate the nuclear family. They want them gone.
So what is the outcome? I mean, we've already answered this question, but what is the end game? If you eliminate a family, a nuclear family, there will be no procreation.
They want everybody to be just like them. They don't think that far ahead.
Well, no, they want population control. If they can, that's part of it. They have several agendas that fits. One, control the population, reduce the population. They also want to eliminate certainty. If they can eliminate certainty, there's nothing more certain than a man and a woman, a male and female, XX and XY. There's the most certain thing in the universe. If they can eliminate that certainty, they can replace it with anything they like. I mean, if you start questioning everything, if X and Y isn't a man anymore, they can replace that reality with anything, and you'll just have to accept it. They're doing that throughout society, and you'll have to accept their version of reality. That's why they don't want AI. That's why they don't want freedom of speech, free news organizations. They don't like Elon and X. They don't want the truth out there, because then they got to start all over again and start convincing everybody and gaslight the planet to believe what they want them to believe, so they can replace it all with their garbage. I mean, that's how Satan's working them. That's what's going on. Satan's working them to an end game, to where he shows up and he sends his false prophet and his beast, and he takes over. You got to eliminate all of God, all of right and wrong,
all the opposition,
black and white. It's all got to be eliminated to accept their new reality.
If you let's go to 2 Timothy 2:1 for a minute. No, we only have two more scriptures to cover. I think we can cover them.
All right. I exhort, therefore, that, first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness.
I'll just ask a simple question. If Timothy said, by the way, if you were a Roman citizen, you could actually vote in those days for certain political offices. But my point is, if Timothy said to pray for better government, then is it wrong to vote for better government? I would say no. Try to vote for the less woke or least woke candidate you can get. Be as unwoke as you can, and it's good for society. I know there are people who say, oh, don't bother voting. I mean, you can do whatever you want, of course. But I believe that if you're going to pray for the best candidate, the lead, and wisdom to our leadership, you got to vote for the better candidates.
So I heard once, you vote for who you want, because you want God to know what you stand for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good way to put it. Why does the world hate the two witnesses?
Well, they don't like what they say.
Because they don't like the truth. They don't want them telling the truth. They don't want to face reality.
If we believe that there is Satan, that is trying to destroy what God's plan is here, or trying to thwart God's plan, one of the best tactics in warfare is to get your enemy to fight among themselves. And that is exactly what we're seeing. We're fighting one another, and we're not even watching where the enemy's coming from. And it's a beautiful tactic, because we'll be totally surprised when we're attacked from without, because we're continually concentrating on the fighting that is going on from within.
I blame the press for a lot of this.
Yeah.
But you look at England, I don't know how divided England is, but it's seriously divided at the moment.
Uh-oh.
We lost him for a second.
He's back.
We'll be back.
And if I am, that'd be wonderful. But I think Satan is going to love the chaos that America's going to get.
Repeat that last bit, because we lost you for a minute. Nope, we lost him again.
Well, you have to determine what is evil. You have to ask yourself, what is evil? Go ahead, Dr. Ricks. Are you back? I guess we lost him.
Nope.
Well, I said something the devil didn't want to be heard. It was a good thing it didn't get out there.
No, you're
still
back.
Trying to work on it. Well, we have to ask what is evil. We got to determine what's evil. And I think people need to realize one thing, maybe out of this conversation, this last part of this conversation is that the battle is not with each other. We got to realize that we're fighting a formidable enemy that is trying to make us fight one another and try to make us believe that each one of the other of our own people is the problem, when in fact we should be united, standing back to back, facing the common enemy who is trying to destroy not only our nation, our society, the blessings that we've been given here in this country, but also the world for his own control and his own purposes. So that is certainly I think something that everyone should look at and realize maybe sometimes you're having a difficult time with a person at work or someone around you or someone in your neighborhood. It might not be just you and that person. It may be some spiritual influence, evil spiritual influence that's there trying to get you to fight amongst yourselves. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Riggs. Thank you. I was about to run out of things to say.
We got him back.
I guess whatever I said, Satan didn't want people to hear it about us. And
I wanted to throw this
unleashing
line in the movie that the greatest deception that Satan ever pulled off was to convince the world he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that fits right where you're talking about, Stan.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
don't realize they don't realize the players. You know, they're focused in what they see right in front of them.
Well, you look at Daniel, what happened in the book of Daniel, you know, when it tells us, you know, that Gabriel was there and he said, I heard your prayer. God heard your prayer. He sent me to answer your prayer. But this prince of Persia withstood me 21 days. So even these archangels had this great power and were unable to go directly to Daniel. They were withstood because of these spiritual forces. And it wasn't until Michael came along and helped him that he was able to deliver the message to Daniel and tell him that God had heard his prayer. And, you know, we forget that spiritual world exists out there, that it is evil and that it does want to thwart God's plan and destroy our faith and our courage and our tenacity and belief that God is going to ultimately put it down and out. And we need to remember that and not fight so much amongst ourselves, but try to take the battle to the enemy, as Paul said, you know.
Yeah.
I can see America getting very divided. One thing, you know, semantic tyranny, I think Bernays believed that it could keep people from thinking thoughts the government didn't want them to think. You put labels on certain things. Well, if I say that, I get this bad label. Do you think they can prevent many Americans from thinking for themselves?
They've already
by
done
putting
that.
labels on things?
I think they're already doing that. Yeah. I mean,
They're making them afraid to.
Yeah.
If you can't say it, you can't think it, right?
Got the speech police. Next thing's the thought police. I read the book.
By the way, one more thing that occurred to me this weekend that may have prophetic meaning. I think it was the defense minister of Israel took about 40 Jews and they prayed on the holy mountain. And you would have thought the world ended because criticism rang out from the PLO and a bunch of others. Oh, it was horrible. Jews are not allowed to pray on the sacred mountain. Only Muslims can pray up there. And our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, you know, he pretty much said, don't mess with the status quo. You're going to make things worse. Can't do it now. And everybody came, and of course Netanyahu went along with it, and everybody in the world says Jews cannot use that sacred mountain for anything spiritual. And a thought occurred to me, and I actually got this from somebody else I saw online, but I'm adding my thoughts to what he said. He said, it's really a spiritual defeat for Israel. And if Israel can't pray on the holy mountain, if they can't put their religious temple up on their sacred mountain next to the Dome of the Rock, then Israel hasn't completely claimed the Holy Land.
makes you wonder if they ever will. And what would happen if they actually did? You know, I think it would be instantaneous war against the Muslims, but
Sure. Absolutely.
I wish they had the courage to do it, personally.
Now, I believe it will be done. Maybe a deal with the beast in the future, or maybe the two witnesses will talk them into it. Or, you know, there are all kind of possibilities where they have nothing else to lose. Everything's gone bad, but it's going to happen. But I know they're afraid to do it. It's almost as if they've given in by
I
not
would
doing it.
I would couch that statement though by saying I don't want them to do it unless they're going to be devoted to God in the process. You know, without His divine help and intervention, it would be a useless, pointless task. But if they're going to be turning to God at the same time, that's an altogether different scenario.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think you're absolutely right, Stan.
That's a good point. I don't know what will happen and when it will happen, but obviously it will happen, just a question. But you realize how far away it looks at this point. Nobody in the world will dare do it. And just a few people praying up there is enough to get the world upset. I'm like, wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
Well, if you were sitting in Poland in 1939, and then you were looking at what was left over in 1945, you know, that was 6 short years. And look how much happened in 6 years. And certainly we live in a world where things could happen even more rapidly because they had the, you know, they had the benefit of exclusivity, you know, or, you know, being incognito in the world, and you can't even be incognito anymore. Everybody's looking at you, satellite imagery or whatever warfare that has that ability. So things could escalate very rapidly in the world. And we certainly want to be watching and praying that we are counted, as Jesus said, we're counted worthy to escape all these things that must come to pass or will come to pass. So, I think wokeism will certainly be a part of what brings those things about, not only in our country, but in the world. I mean, this is happening in nations all over the world now, not just our own.
Like, did you know the EU is threatening Elon Musk for daring to have an open interview with Donald Trump? And I'm presuming that, you know, they weren't going to do anything like, let's burn down the world. You know, they just have, and it's almost as if free speech, unwoke speech, is such a threat that the European Union is practically, I don't know, doesn't that seem weird to you?
Not surprising.
No.
Anybody that looks at American democracy, American history, though, and sees the beauty of our ability to be able to, people that come here from these communist countries and see that we have the ability to just stand up and say what we want to say are shocked because we have such a glorious, beautiful, free country. And that because they've come from such an oppressed country, and they warn us over and over again, if we're not careful, we're subject to lose this great freedom that we have. And yet we still are headed down that same path that they are.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them talking, saying,
Yeah.
I've seen this before in 1939, or, you know, some other point that's now something like.
Yeah, or people that come out from, you know, communist China or, you know, from the Soviet Union, they're just like, you people over here don't realize how great you have it, you know, because we can't dare say certain things without being shipped away to prison immediately, or maybe you and your whole family, you know. And yet we walk around and say what we want to say, and, you know, relatively without consequence.
So it would be interesting to see if Elon Musk can get away with it. Free speech, they don't, if it's not woke, you know, they don't want to hear it.
Well, they got to walk very lightly around Elon Musk because he carries with him a lot of support. So they got to be careful how they don't really know how to handle him, I don't think, because of his power, influence, and money and support that he has. So they, you know, they can't just, you know, blackball him like they would some, you know, the guy that Mike Liddell that did My Pillow, you know, they tried to blackball him. Fortunately, he had enough support to survive, or else he would have went bankrupt and almost did, you know, from the lawsuits that he went through. But with Elon Musk, that's a little bit different story. I mean, that guy has a lot more power influence, and so I don't think they know quite what to do with him yet.
I like that. Free and if he could buy YouTube, wouldn't that be wonderful?
I mean, yeah, that's not going to happen.
And they probably won't allow that to happen. That'd be too much free speech, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That we'll have to make the best of. But you know that free speech and free thought are being limited. And in great countries like Great Britain and Canada, it'll surprise you what's going on over there. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we probably have covered the topic. Want to thank everybody, and sorry my Wi-Fi messed up. Who knows?
Oh,
what's
it was just
going
for
on.
a second. We're all good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yep.
I thought it was a great show, guys.
Yep.
Enjoyed it very much.
Well, with that said, I'll say, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. It should be a good day around here tomorrow, and we'll see y'all back here good next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.